So my name is Martha Whiting. I'm the content marketing manager here at UserGems. And of course, this is Brains of GTM. This is only our second session. And I'm very excited today to welcome Caden King. And we've also got Julien Sauvage as well. So you may know, or maybe you had a little read of it, but last year we surveyed 100 revenue leaders for our State of AI Adoption report. Now, I was really heavily involved in this and I ran all the data, did all the analysis. And what we found was that 97% of teams are investing in AI, but only 7% are actually seeing a measurable pipeline from it. So today we've got Caden King and Julien Sauvage, who are going to walk us through the different builds that they've done, things that are actually working for them. And I'm really interested because these are things with measurable results, and we're going to be diving into these two very different plays today. So let me introduce Caden. So Caden runs acquisition ABM at Snowflake, and for 5 years he's been chasing enterprises' biggest net new logos. And now he's leading a team that's pioneering agentic workflows for ABM. So we're talking agents that kind of pick accounts, write ad copy, draft sales emails, and launch campaigns as well. And his philosophy, which we also very much believe at UserGems, is to kill that silo between sales and marketing. And he also believes that they should run as one engine. So we'll be hearing more about that in just a moment. And of course, we've got Julien Sauvage here, who is CMO at Cordial. Now, Julien spent the last 10 years leading marketing at category-defining companies. You've probably heard of a few. We've got Salesforce, Gong, Clary, and also now Cordial, of course. Now at Cordial, they're using UserGems for outbound. But today we'll be hearing about how he's building those AI motions that ship content at scale, score accounts on real intent, and also make really strategic calls that lots of teams are kind of still leaving up to humans. So it's safe to say that Julien thinks very, very deeply about positioning, brand, and the psychology of why these messages stick. So we've got two very different approaches, ABM agents and then branding content at scale, but we've got the same outcome, which is AI that's actually delivering pipeline. So yeah, just a quick housekeeping from me. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So please do keep your questions coming in throughout. It's really great to hear from you. And both of our speakers are more than happy to answer absolutely anything. We'll be starting today with Caden. So I'll hand over to him just now.
Thanks, Martha. And then, perfect. Thank you. Hey, everyone. I'm Caden. As Martha mentioned, I lead the acquisition net new logo motion for the account-based marketing team over at Snowflake. And really just getting started here. What we've kind of seen over the past year or two is that ABM teams are getting really good at running campaigns and targeting the right accounts. In general, they've just gotten so much better at segmentation, personalization, and really like scaling outreach. But simultaneously, at least what I'm seeing is that they can also still struggle with execution. And I think turning those agentic workflows into actual close one revenue. And one of the reasons for that is something that I think we've all heard about many times before. Marketing and sales still operating in silos, right? And so ultimately, if you don't reconcile those two, again, marketing and sales, you don't just have a misalignment problem, right? In this case, you end up ultimately burning tokens to solve problems that aren't really there according to your sales teams potentially. And so the question that really we've been asking ourselves as we built out our agentic workflows is, what does agentic ABM look like if it actually reflects how our sales teams sell and connects marketing data to sales' reality? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to keep going here. This is our ABM innovation framework. And I think when we started thinking about how to do ABM differently in an agentic paradigm, the thing that I'm proud of is we didn't inherently start with like, what do I wish was automated? Instead, I think we really started from a revenue perspective. What are the opportunities that the company is betting on? And what are the biggest challenges that are keeping our execs up at night concurrently? And that led us to think about ABM in a few different layers, from each of which I've brought an example today. At the base, in that bottom left corner, you have automating current work, things that save time and remove manual effort, which is important, of course, and a big advantage of agentic workflows. Top left corner, you have marketing force multipliers, things that help scale campaigns and messaging, also very important, of course. Bottom right corner, you have direct revenue drivers. I think where you're actually like helping shape how sales prioritizes and focuses, something very near and dear to our hearts here at the Snowflake ABM team. And then finally, in the top right corner, you have revenue multipliers, where I think you start to really influence like where to invest and how to allocate resources across a marketing and a go-to-market org. In my view, like most teams are doing a great job in the first two layers off to the left, but a huge opportunity, and the one I would argue largely moves revenue, is really in those two to the right. Because that's no longer where you're just increasing activity. Instead, you're kind of improving how decisions get made across more than just your own marketing org, hence the revenue multiplier effect. So let's get into some examples. Again, if slide 2 is about focusing like sales on data-driven decision making, then this is one of the simplest places where we started applying that. What we tend to see today is a lot of the data that like marketing teams may produce, like it's all very technically useful, right? But I think sometimes it fails to be like usable for sales teams specifically. We have engagement data and campaign performance and intent signals, all coming from the marketing side, like any other account-based marketing team. But an area where there's been a gap in the past, I think, is the fact that all those signals and sort of engagement points still require the rep to interpret all of it and then decide like what is the next step for them. And in practice, I think that interpretation step is kind of where things break down. Like I've been on so many calls with sales reps and sales leaders where the two of them can look at like the same data and just come to completely and like wildly different conclusions. And or more commonly, like they may just not act on the data at all because they don't know like what to do. So I think like when we went to develop sort of weekly or monthly sales insights emails that are sent to our sales teams, instead of asking like, how do we give sales more data? We really asked like a slightly different question, which is just like, how do we make the next step for sales as obvious as possible? And so what we landed on here is something that is pretty simple. Instead of a dashboard, each AE gets like a weekly narrative of what's actually happening in their patch. And more importantly, thanks to the agentic workflow that our team built out here, it's not just one generic report, but instead each AE will get a different story because like each of their patches literally behaves differently and has a different set of context points attached to it. In other words, some might have strong engagement in like a specific set of accounts. Others might have activity concentrated in like a particular persona. Ultimately, the goal here is not to like automate reporting. It's really just to remove ambiguity for reps. And so in that vein, as you can kind of see in the middle right of the screenshot with the bullet points, we're really seeking to give reps like a point of view and natural language in these sales insight emails, so that the data is as actionable as possible and we don't miss out on that closed loop directly attached to revenue with these programs. Just a small example that's being built out, but an important one because again, it's one of the first places you move from generating insight to actually influencing sales behavior. I'm going to keep going here. Right here is kind of where we started focusing on the marketing side with our ABM ad copy curator. I think a lot of the early work around AI and ABM has been focused on generating campaigns, like creating variations and testing messaging and optimizing performance and all of that jazz. And we are doing that here as well. We can generate multiple versions of an ad, run them in parallel, quickly identify which of them performs best. This example, this hypothetical example, is a bit of a cheeky one, but it's representative of something we see all the time on our side, which is you run a few variations and one message clearly outperforms the other. And I think what's interesting there is like usually that middle with just identifying like the top performing ad is where a process will usually stop with regards to a go-to-market team. At best, maybe you scale it across a couple other campaigns and you call that a success. And like, to be fair, that is a success from a marketing perspective. But I think if you go back to the problem we talked about earlier, in a way, it doesn't really solve like the action gap for sales. So instead of keeping that insight within marketing, what we try to do here is translate it into something sales can actually use. In other words, like what narrative should they lead with and what angle should they take in outbound and how should they position themselves? The goal there is just not to test messaging, but to turn that guidance that we're trying to provide into guidance at scale so that sales can actually use it. And Isaac asked a question here. What are you using to build internal tools like the ABM ad copy generator / what we're using now is an internal tool called Coco. And essentially using Coco, if you're a Snowflake customer, you can run something like Anthropic's Cowork or ChatGPT's Codex across your Snowflake data without having to create a direct connection. And it has really, really, really accelerated our ability to vibe code different solutions like the ones we're talking about today. That's a great question. I'm going to keep going here into the more fun stuff. Whoops, here we are. So this is the part of the framework we call direct revenue drivers. Going back to earlier, it's that bottom right corner of the slide we talked about earlier. Up to this point, I think we've been talking about things that support execution, like automation and campaigns and messaging. And I would argue this is where ABM starts to really like directly influence pipeline and revenue, because it's about the decisions that determine where sales actually spends their time. So one of the patterns that I see every day is that different sales teams aren't just working different accounts. Instead, they're really like dealing with completely different problems, especially at the leadership level. So in this example, as shown from the prompt on the left side of the screen, like this hypothetical sales segment is getting meetings, but those meetings aren't converting into sales qualified opportunities. And, that's a very different situation than a team that, for instance, is struggling to generate meetings in the first place, right? But a lot of ABM account selection systems or apps will treat those two segments as the same. They'll give you like a static list of target accounts. And the assumption is that the list should work like regardless of what's happening on the ground for those respective sales teams. So the question that we've been asking ourselves as we developed our account selection automation app is, should that output actually be the same every single time? Or should it be more contextual? And so if we look again at the input here, the request is framed around that specific problem. Again, we're getting a lot of meetings, but we're not converting. So instead of optimizing for engagement in that account selection, AKA who will take the first meeting with us, the system shifts towards signals that are more predictive of conversion into an actual opportunity. That means our agent is selecting for accounts where we see stronger alignment to ICP, like stronger buying signals or patterns that correlate with opportunity creation, not just people going to our website, right? And so the output here you see isn't just like a ranked list of active accounts. It's really a prioritized set of accounts that are more likely to to turn into opportunities, given that context. And if the problem were different, say getting first meetings or maybe like bottom of funnel conversion, moving things across sales stages, that output would change accordingly. So again, instead of treating account selection as a fixed input, we're really letting it adapt to the problem that sales is trying to solve. Moving on here into our last quadrant, and my favorite, revenue multipliers. Again, it's about leveraging agents to help make decisions that cross-functionally and strategically scale pipeline. And so here's a very quick, like concrete example of what that practice looks like. This is our database coverage app that we vibe coded. As noted by the prompt on the left, what we're looking at here is a way to decide where additional effort and account enrichment resources will actually turn into pipeline. And so on the x-axis with this chart that I have here, on that x-axis, you have database coverage, aka how complete our contact data is in ABM accounts relative to a benchmark. And on the y-axis, you have pipeline coverage. And so each point is like a hypothetical district. And it's showing us two things at once. It's showing us like on that x-axis, how prepared are we to engage? And on the y-axis, how much opportunity is already there in a given segment. Now, I think the instinct is usually to look at this and ask like, where are we undercovered? Like, let's just throw resources there. But that's not really the question that we're fully trying to answer here. Really, the question we are trying to answer here is like, where can we optimize for as much revenue as possible? And so if you look at the top right, just for instance, like those districts are already very well covered and the pipeline is strong. And sure, like we could invest there more, but it wouldn't really be creating new revenue. And really, we'd just be adding more activity into something that is already working, right? And then you have areas where coverage is low, the pipeline is already strong, like top left corner. And like these are technically data gaps that in theory might be worth solving, but they're not places where we are going to create like meaningful pipeline since sales already has their hands full with converting like a full funnel full of opportunities. Meanwhile, I think if you look at bottom left, like these are the areas where we're undercovered and pipeline is relatively low. So like that's not just a gap, that's headroom. In other words, that's where improving coverage can actually create new pipeline that doesn't exist today and where sales would be like desperate to work the opportunities that we're helping them pipe, frankly. In other words, instead of treating coverage as a data problem, we're treating it as like a cross-functional revenue decision and where can we focus resources to actually improve like revenue outcomes? And that's really the point of the slide and like our whole database coverage agent. And I'm so glad people in the chat like it. It's not just telling us like where we're missing data, it's telling us where we can create pipeline using agentic workflows and meanwhile, where we can't do it. And so last example, very briefly here. And it's kind of a two-parter in terms of continuing off the last example. You know, once we know actually where it's worth investing, the next question is who inside the accounts is actually going to matter. Hence that prompt on the left side of the screen. What do we do within our underinvested districts from a persona perspective? And what this view is showing on the right side is our current contact coverage across key persona groups compared to a benchmark. And so each bar represents how many contacts we have for like a given persona in our ABM accounts. And the benchmark shows what that distribution should look like based on high performing segments. And so the gap between the two, like the light blue and the dark blue, is what matters. It tells us where we're under indexed relative to what good coverage would actually look like. And I think the default way to look at this is something like, where are we missing contacts? Let's just buy contacts to fill those gaps. But similar to the last slide, I think from a resource point of view, that's not really the question that we should care about. Instead, I think the question should be rooted in revenue, and it should be which of these gaps actually affects our ability to create pipeline. because in practice, trying to close every gap across every persona at the same time usually isn't realistic. Not just from a resourcing point of view on like the marketing side, but I think from the sales point of view too. That's a lot to ask sales to absorb from like a focus and an enablement point of view. Ultimately, like we wouldn't want to turn this into a contact dump, in other words, where we add a bunch of new personas and like spend a bunch of money against them and tokens and they never actually get worked. So instead, we use this framework within our database coverage agent to prioritize. We pick a specific persona group where the gap is meaningful. We focus there first, and we align enablement, messaging, and outreach around that group. In other words, instead of trying to fill every gap evenly, we prioritize based on the sizes and the significance of the gap. Larger gaps and higher impact personas would get addressed first after sales buy-in, because that is where coverage is most likely to change the outcome on the previous slide in our matrix and thus increase revenue. Closing out here, and just to sum things up, I think what we've seen with agentic ABM workflows is that it's a lot easier to generate like more marketing and more output, but it really requires cross-functional conversations and big picture alignment to exec level revenue priorities to turn those agentic inputs into actual revenue and be part of that 7%. So that's what I got for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Caden. It was a complete joy to listen to. Absolutely loved it. So we're going to be going to questions shortly. We have had an issue, just I'm going to say really quickly, with the watch time. So if anyone has any later questions, feel free to pop them in and we'll get to those at the end. But in the meantime, we're going to hand over to Julien, and yeah, keep those questions coming in and we'll get to those shortly. Here we go.
So hopefully you can all see my screen. Presentation today, it's less about prompts and agents. It's more about sort of systems, if you will. Specifically, this is how I've used AI inside a modern content engine and brand engine that would create inbound pipeline over time. This is all very like heavily inspired, I would say, by what worked for us during Gong's hyper growth phase, 2020 to 2022, and later at Clary. Clary, we actually saw a 40% increase in inbound pipe, sort of following some of these steps. So it works, or at least it worked, and hopefully there's some good learnings in there. All right, so this is what we will talk about today. Some of you might know me. I am French. I always make French dad jokes, or like I always talk about French food and pastries and croissants and all of that nonsense. So this is going to be your interaction moment on the chat. Tell us if you know the names of the two things you see, not AI, but like the two things you see on the screen. One on the left, it's salty and savory. If you know what that is, just put the name in the chat. And the other one is more like a pastry. I think it's delicious. Also put that in the chat. I will not continue talking until I see some interactions in the chat, because I don't mind awkward silence. So how do you call these? Do you know? My God, not a whole lot of like chat people here. Grilled cheese, croque monsieur, happiness, flaky cake. Isaac, it's cool. Yeah, all of them are correct. Thank you for bearing with me. The one on the left-hand side is called the croque monsieur. I'm just gonna paste the definition here. I think it's delicious. And the one on the right-hand side is called millefeuille, which means 1,000 layers. And what these have in common is what? What's in common behind these two things, apart from the fact that they're French? There's one word I would want to see on the chat. One word that these two things have something in common. Stacked, yeah, okay, good. Starts with an L. L. Carve. Yeah, that's right. What I would the layers, there you go. Thank you, Trinity. She cheated because she's seen my presentation, so that doesn't count. You don't win anything. It's layers, right? So this is the simplest version of the framework. It's a 3-layer version. I like to call it the AI croque monsieur. Top layer, you have AI doing all the research for you. Middle layer, you have still human stuff. Humans creating the story, humans creating the POV, the taste, the emotional hook, that little twist of black pepper on top to like add that extra umami flavor. And then the bottom layer is AI that helps you measure what actually works. It's a simplistic framework, but it kind of works. AI in, human in the middle, AI out. That's what it is. And I think sometimes a lot of teams, they forget about one of the three. They would be really strong at research and maybe at, like the actual human layer, but they don't fully measure. Or they're really strong at the human layer, but they don't really like do all the data stuff. So as always, the key is, serve all the layers with the best sort of like taste and quality possible. Now, this slide is about the top layer. So it's the research layer. I think the biggest mistake that teams make is treating research like a one-time thing. It's like, oh, cool, I have like an upcoming strategic deal or meeting next week. I'm going to do research on that one account. Or we're going to redo positioning because whatever. So we're going to do research. Research should be continuous, right? And like it's such a strong use case and fit for AI because as we all know, AI is incredibly useful and helpful because it can synthesize those huge amounts of information quickly. But here, what I hope people can take away from this slide is you need to really deeply think through the breadth of inputs. Sometimes people get away with, oh yeah, I did a voice of the customer research with AI, analyzing my Gong calls. That's a great idea. Gong calls is like 5% of the whole piece of the pie, right? You want signals from customers, lost deals, future buyers, the ones that are not even in Gong because you haven't even engaged with them. You want to see what the competitors are doing, not just the current competitive set. You want to think about the competitors you compete on budget, not tech with. You want to know what's happening there. You want to take a look at the legacy tools. You want to talk to your internal teams, and not just the sales teams, but also the CS team, the product team, the engineering team, the support team. Like there's so many sources. And I think that common mistake is to go deep into one or two of them and not broad enough. So let's take a look at what that would mean for this engaged buyer. So it's buyers on sales calls. The sales calls typically would be recorded in Gong or somewhere else, right? And so I'll just show you how we're doing it at Cordial today, if that's okay. This is going to be the first of the two demos. We're using an app called Tribal. What it does is it's kind of like a custom GPT on top of your Gong data. I'll argue you can also connect your Claude or your LLM UI to the new Gong MCP or whatever tools you're using, right? So that all works. So what I'm going to do here, this is the Tribal custom GPT. I'm going to make sure it starts fresh. Live demo, everybody. So if it doesn't work, then you will have to bear with me. I'm going to tell Tribal, so that app, that we are Cordial. I need to give him the work email, All right, so we're all set. And then this is where you can, like you have a few prompts and like topic openers. You can ask anything you want. What pain points are our technical buyers raising about agentic commerce lately? So this is kind of hinting at the fact that you want to know what's top of mind for your technical buyers. So it's kind of like the who or the audience, the topic, the what, agentic commerce. And lately, you're kind of like talking about the when. So in one simple prompt, you kind of like ask who, what, and when sort of questions, right? And then you would just prompt and sort of like start talking to the app. You need to confirm that the app can access your Gong data set. And then you see, things like that. Themes, what technical buyers are actually struggling with, emerging buyer language shift, which can be helpful if you want to sort of like tweak your campaign messaging and lingo, blah, blah, blah. There's revenue signals. There's a lot, probably there's way too much. So like that's how we've been using it. Hopefully that's helpful. Everybody could do that. Like you can, as I said, just like hook your MCP server, hook your Claude to whatever call recording tool you have, MCPs, and then you're off to the races. All right, so that was one example, one silly little example of sort of like the AI helping with research. Now, the middle layer is still, hopefully, for a little while still, the human layer, right? Where if you want to come up with the sharpest strategic POV, you still require judgment, intuition, emotional understanding, originality, timing, those things, because we all know that the best marketing still feels human. The last part is also something that we're intensively doing and using at Cordial, and I've used at my past gigs, Gong, and even Salesforce actually back then, although it was pre-LLM, so it was more manual. Is like, okay, now you measure what works, and I think the key thing here is how many times have people heard like, oh, I can't measure brand. I don't know what actually moves pipeline. And some of those questions were even in Caden's presentation, right? Like what activities actually work and what compounds over time. How long should we wait before we can judge impact? What brand activities will sort of like drive revenue later? And so what I sort of like built here is the lightweight framework that basically does correlation analysis, but in a smart way, because we all know there's lag, right? If you do a brand campaign and UserGems is going to do or is doing a brand campaign right now, right? You might have seen some stuff on LinkedIn with some beautiful art. Like you do that today, how long will it take to turn into pipeline? Probably months. So you need to introduce that lag aspect. And also we all know that it's not just one thing. You also need in the analysis to introduce the notion of like an interaction. Maybe it's not your brand campaign that creates pipeline. Maybe it's your brand campaign combined with media activity that then creates pipeline. So you need to do sort of like second order interaction, effect, if you will. So all of that stuff can be like mathy and nerdy. I don't mind. I come from that world, but it's hard, right? It can be a little hard. And if you want to use it, I will gladly share the thing with you after. All you have to do is upload your marketing data, and then you can you're off to the races. So same. Let's do a little demo time here. Not the tribal thing. But yeah, this is an anonymized sort of like version of what the input should look like. You see by month, it could be by week, by quarter, by day, whatever. Like you see by time, some sort of more like brand metrics on social, website traffic, search traffic, number of press releases, media share of voice, blah blah blah. Like you can do whatever you want. And then on the right-hand side, you put whatever output metric you want to sort of like do the analysis for. In our case, at Cordial, we did marketing generated pipeline and overall pipeline generated across sources, right? And then AI is going to automatically do the correlations for you. It's basically going to correlate what drives pipeline. So there's I built two things for this, and I'm happy to share this with anybody. I'll put that in the chat, or you can just like, connect with me on LinkedIn and like send me a message, whatever. But this is a Claude skill, so I built a Claude skill for that. It's kind of very long in a way, but it gives all the helpful context, and you don't have to think about like modeling and whatnot. It's all good. It's all in there. I also built a custom GPT, which we can take a quick look at. This is my marketing impact analysis by me. And then there's a few sort of like conversation openers. If you just do the basic, analyze my marketing impact data, it's going to ask me for data, right? Duh. So I'm going to upload that exact file I just showed you, marketing impact analysis, remember, with the input and the outcome. Put that here. And there we go. It's going to take a few seconds. It's gonna scan the data. It's gonna do the analysis, do the lag analysis in the custom GPT. Sorry, I even specify the output format, which in my case is going to be a like a Canva type of format, if you will, like a report, if you will. And this is taking a little too long, but let's give it another shot. I don't know what's going on. It was working, of course, like 10 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago. But at the end, you would get something that would look, I'll just show you what it looks like. You would take a look. I mean, you would produce something that would look sort of like this. That would be your marketing impact analysis. You would have a little overview, exact summary, TLDR, the data set in scope. It's all automated. And then the quick impact. In this case, for that data set, if you produce more pieces of content, at the same time you are increasing your media share of voice, it correlates with pipeline with a pretty strong correlation coefficient. And so that's one indicator of success, right? Let's see if the ChatGPT thing, yeah, it ended the analysis. So you see, same, it's different data set, but like you would see the same. If you increase social impressions and engagement rate, then it correlates with your pipeline with a 1 month lag, for example. So no more your board asking for things like, can you measure the impact of brand? And because I don't believe in it, the answer is yes, we can. And here's the result. All right, we're almost done. I have, I think, one more slide, and then we'll be kind of done. As you start getting more like AI fluent, you add more layers, and I think you reach a point where there's too many layers, right? But and then you have like a very like hard to digest millefeuille. But I still like this version of the millefeuille. I think it's still very edible. Sorry. The top 2 layers are the same ones I just talked about. The bottom one measure is also the same one. And then as you see, there's a bunch of additional layers I just put in there. One of them that I actually really like is AI can help you sort of like rate your story. I actually built a POV sniff test agent myself, where if you can, happy to share as well, just again, you can just reach out on LinkedIn. Like you give it any positioning doc or any like message campaign document, campaign message document, it's going to analyze this and it's going to tell you, hey, I think this part is strong, but this one lacks a little bit of like a villain, and this one is a little flat and should be more emotional. Like every story has elements, right? And I think it would be a crime to not use AI to sort of like assess the strength of a given story based on whether these elements are in the story. The other one that I want to spend time on is none of this stuff. Like you research, you create the perfect POV. Your POV is great. Like you get internal alignment. You then like produce all the waterfall content assets across all the channels. None of that matters if your internal team isn't bought in. It does not matter. And to do that, you need to enable them. You need to sustain that POV. You need to reinforce the POV over and over again. You need to market your marketing. You need to do internal communications. Ultimately, sellers drive the deals forward, right? So if they're not bought in, a little bit to Caden's point about sales and marketing silos, it's just not going to work. That part is so crucial. So no AI can help there. It's all about humans talking to humans. So don't forget that sort of like internal enablement and internal buy-in aspect. Yeah, I know we're at time. I just had, this was an example of like an old Clary waterfall chart that we had of the webinar asset. And then you see a bunch of things over here. And you actually don't need to use AI to do this. You can like map things yourself, but of course it's going to be faster if you use AI. That's it. So I'll leave you with that one thing. Pick your layers. Start with the croque monsieur. Don't forget about judgment and taste and originality in the middle. And I really believe the best systems will not be fully automated. They will be intelligently layered like a delicious millefeuille. And sorry if some people are very hungry right now. I'm hungry too.
I was just going to say I'm ready for a snack now, actually. Thank you so much, Julien. Feel free to collapse
Sure.
your slides just now. I'll pop the Q&A just up here as well.
I did not monitor the Q&A. I'm sorry if people were asking questions.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Caden, can you see us on your screen just there as well? Yeah?
Yep, I can see it perfectly.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much, both of you. This is super interesting. I was enjoying that thoroughly, hearing these two very, very different plays. And thank you so much, Julien, as well, for showing us the live demos and how you go about it. We do have some Q&As just here. I've also got some for you and also from the team as well. But let's get started with Caden. Caden, I'm really curious just to know before we get into the Q&A side of things from the chat. Obviously, yeah, Julien spoke a lot about measurement and all the rest of it. For you, how do you do that measurement? How do you make sure you're in that 7%? I'd be really curious to hear about that from you.
Yeah, to be brief, and the measurement question is a good one. I guess for us, like the first thing we look at isn't quote unquote pipeline or revenue in terms of figuring out if we actually created a revenue impact. It's really measuring whether we actually change sales behavior, I think. In other words, if we can't prove that sales is using sort of what we're serving up to them, then it doesn't matter how good the model is, right? So we really start with like, are reps actually working these accounts or engaging these personas that we're bringing in? And we measure that through like a true funnel based on the accounts we're targeting, basically. And then we look at outcomes like specifically touch rates and conversion rates and ultimately pipeline creation and close one revenue in those segments. In other words, if both the behavioral inputs and the pipeline outputs are changing, then we know it's working and we can actually consider the new agentic workflow like a success and put ourselves in that 7% pocket.
Okay, perfect. That's super helpful. Thank you. And just to follow that up, actually, we've got a question here from Alexander for you, Caden. Alexander's asked, how do you balance automated or pushed information, your weekly review, versus on-demand agentic flows? E.g., an AE wants to get a POV on an account. Are they able to pull from your insights within their AI interface, such as Codex or Claude?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the push stuff, like the weekly review or monthly review, that's really just about keeping everyone like oriented, right? It's supposed to be lightweight. It shows what changed, and it gives AEs or sales leaders like a quick sense of where to focus without them having to go look for it. I think the on-demand flow piece is a lot different. And kind of to Alexander's point, I think there's like two different ways to go about it. There's sort of like like a notification gets sent to Slack that like X person did X thing or X account did X thing. And I think it's really easy for those to just kind of get blended into the noise in a way, and for sales to ignore them and thus to like not solve that closed loop problem in terms of applying ABM programs to revenue. With on demand, almost like to Alexander's point, we've taken more of like a self-serve approach with our AEs. We have pushed like all of our ABM data. So like engagement and intent and the account lists themselves and the campaigns they're involved with to Snowflake Intelligence, which is an in-house product available to Snowflake customers, which is a like chat GPT like interface. Where, again, if you're a Snowflake customer, it brings all Snowflake data together in like a governed, secure way with clear semantic layers. And we typically find that like AEs will self-serve in really simple but effective ways where they'll just like ask the interface, like, what should I reach out to X account with? In other words, just simple questions like that. But I do think another good practice to Alexander's question is sort of just putting together like a list of good ones for AEs to ask like Snowflake Intelligence or their chat GPT like interface as it pertains to how to best take advantage of ABM engagement at any given time. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Yeah, Alexander, let us know if you have any follow-ups there. I have an interesting one that we've been discussing a lot. I guess this is more on the brand side, but also, Caden, I'm interested to hear from your perspective too. And it's the element that Julien was talking about, and keeping things human. And of course, we hear this all the time. It's one of our kind of key discussion points in Humans of GTM as well. I'm really placing the emphasis there. One thing we have been discussing is the idea of kind of like taste, originality, artistry. And in the report that we ran, it said that 29% of people wanted to kind of protect creative work from AI. That included writing as well as visuals as well. I know both of you will have different slants on this perhaps, but it's also the thing that they wanted to protect is also the number one or the number two thing that they wanted to progress, which is really interesting. I'm really curious in terms of your take on this. How do you feel about creative aspects coming from AI, where the human comes in, where it's best to kind of leave it to AI as well? Where do you kind of agree with this? Where do you push back? How do you feel about it? Julien, I'd love to start with you first on this one.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's, in a few weeks, months, I don't know, like there's not going to be content that AI wouldn't have touched. Like the AI is going to touch like 100% of any piece of content you see out there, whether it's words or visuals or something, at least in like B2B tech, right? Like it's happening, and it's a good thing for a lot of reasons. But I think it's more like upstream, the core idea, and I think it has to be still based on human and judgment and taste. Like that's kind of it. Like if the idea is strong, then downstream AI is going to help like create all those pieces of content, and it's going to be actually really, really good, very, very strong. I would never outsource ideas to AI, or like I would use AI as a partner to like do back and forth and do a little prompting and whatnot. I do think, by the way, on a side note, prompting is almost like seen as not enough anymore in AI world. It's all about agents and automation and co-work and cloud code. I get that, but you still need the prompting to just go back and forth and sharpen your human mind and POV. So that's kind of my answer. I think AI is inevitable and it's helping, but I wouldn't outsource the core initial idea upstream to it. I think it still needs to be human, otherwise you lose a bit of that taste and that originality.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Julien. And Caden, how about for you?
Real quick, I'll take kind of the classic angle in the sense that one can leverage agentic workflows to automate away sort of aspects of a role that they might not enjoy as much, right? To free up time to focus on sort of quote unquote the more creative side of an ABM role, let's say. I think two areas where we've really seen that on the Snowflake side is sort of leaning more into like direct mail as well as sort of like video, specifically video that highlights like humans that might be working on an account team, for instance, to get in front of accounts. I think both of those angles, which again are more like rooted in the physical world, I think they actually take like a lot of time to prepare because they are like inherently more human and like physical in a way. But like without all the agentic workflows we've developed to automate campaigns, for instance, like we never would have gotten to that point. And so I think the AI sort of works well with the creative side of our roles rather than being like in conflict with it.
Okay, perfect. No, it's really, really interesting to hear. And I think also like on the agentic side of things, I know resistance is like one of the huge things we're always hearing about. I know in this report, I think it was, I don't remember the stats now, but it was around about a third of teams saying that they have kind of like active resistance within their teams, kind of, and getting over that barrier as well. For both of you in terms of agentic things, I mean, yeah, Julien, for you, how do you kind of handle that on your teams as well? How do you get people excited to kind of embrace it all?
Excited about the agentic workflow part of the job. Yeah, I mean it's kind of what Caden said. It frees up time to think and continue to be creative and be human. So we've automated a lot of things, a lot of like on the research side. What I showed is still a little manual and prompty, but like competitive insights and competitive monitoring and whatnot, like that's very easy to monitor. Like building an agent to like track, web page changes of your competitors' product pages is so easy, and then you can have your weekly digest, and people love that. So yeah, I think it's all about trying to find the pieces, the more tedious part of the work, and then people love the automation that agents can bring for sure. Like I haven't seen a whole lot of resistance, at least internally, to use agents in production for sure.
Amazing. Okay, super interesting. And for you, Kaden, we've got a question here from Isaac. Just a quick one in terms of what build internal tool. Sorry, I just read that completely wrong. What are you using to build internal tools like the ABM ad copy generator or one-to-one ABM ad analytics tools as well?
Yeah, we use Snowflake Cocoa. And it's
I love that name, by the way. It's a cool name. I want to buy it. I don't think I can. I don't have budget, but it's a cool name.
Thank you. Cortex Code, Cocoa, basically allows you to run any of like the major vibe coding tools. So something like Cowork or Codex through Snowflake. And instead of having to create and essentially like going and doing it through Anthropic or OpenAI yourself and having to create like a direct Snowflake connection, which is a lot more time consuming. You can just do everything within Snowflake itself. And it is like, if you're a Snowflake customer, it will massively, massively, massively accelerate your time to value from a vibe coding perspective as you go to build solutions like this yourself. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. We have one more for you, Kaden, as well. Trinity's asked, maybe she missed this at the beginning, but the hardest part for ABM is keeping individual reps aligned and act on these accounts. How do you do this?
Yeah, I think the short answer is like, we don't try to align reps to like a rigid system. Instead, we try to align our agentic outputs to how reps actually work. I think most alignment problems with sales come from asking them to adapt to something that like doesn't fit their context. In other words, like a generic account list or a campaign they didn't ask for or a dashboard, they're just like never going to check. So instead we start with the problem they're dealing with when we sit down with them. Are they trying to generate pipeline because pipeline coverage is low? Are they trying to just move currently existing pipeline through the funnel? Are they trying to unblock like a couple white whale deals? And we shape our outputs around that and sort of like our suite of skills around that as well. And then we keep it simple too. Like we don't try to change everything at once. We just try to stay focused with them with like one clear action, one set of accounts, one persona group. And if it fits how they're already working, like they're going to use it. And that closed loop issue of realizing revenue won't occur. That's typically what we see.
Okay, perfect. This is a really good answer. Okay, we've got time for one last question here. I'd love to ask about data because I do love data. And I remember when I was going through all these different answers from all these, it was over 100 revenue leaders and really diving into it. So many people were saying that they just don't trust their data. It was well over 50%. And we all know that, if you add AI on top of bad data, it can turn into a complete nightmare and things can become problems way, way, way faster. So for both of you, that kind of really important foundational layer, how did you kind of like fix your data layer before kind of like layering in on top when you go in with these things? How did that look like for both of you?
I can go. Go ahead, Julien, and then I'll go.
I think it all depends on like what data, right? Like people always focus on the negatives. So yes, maybe 20% of your overall data set isn't working, but there's still 80% of the data set that's working. So I always think you never wait for data quality to be perfect because it's a mirage. It never will happen. And we have a strong RevOps team here at Cordial, and we always sort of like, we have like sort of like background stuff to like clean up the data, make it better. We use AI to like, enhance that. But at the same time, we still, automate and do outbound and do in-person programs and a bunch of stuff on the 80% of the data that we still feel good about. So I think my data isn't ready. It's just a a fool's errand or like a false choice. It's never going to be ready, but you shouldn't wait either.
Okay, this is good advice. Yeah, and I guess once you have that kind of human judgment embedded into that flow as well, it's also, that's where it comes in helpful, right?
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. And for you, Caden?
I have the benefit of like literally working for a data company. So,
tell us
Not
how
fair.
Yeah. I think our adage is, you know, you don't have an AI strategy if you don't have a data strategy. So in some sense, I think I've inherited a really sophisticated data strategy from sort of like the shared services teams that my ABM team tends to work with. And the summary there, I suppose, would be just starting with a really strong data platform instead of trying to tie your entire data strategy together through a series of MCPs. Will reduce the volume of hallucinations that you run into as you attempt to agentify your go-to-market strategy.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. I think we're well and truly at time now. And apologies for our little techie glitch at the beginning, but it's great to see so many of you here. It's been a complete joy to have both Caden and Julien here today, sharing everything that they've shared today. I will just say, if you do want to continue these sorts of conversations, swap notes with other people, and get those conversations going. We are going to be in San Francisco with these two, finally in San Francisco, and on June 17th for Humans of GTM. All information for that can be found on the banner on our website, so just feel free to click through, and all the information will be there. But thank you so much to Julien and Caden today. I'll be sending out an email for all of you tomorrow morning with a rundown of everything, some quick takeaways and everything else that you need in order to watch on playback as well. But thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you all in the next one.